back to 1971. Disco lit up the dance floor. All in the Family was the #1 television show, and the Godfather movie dominated the box office. But a particularly disturbing trend wasn't entertainment, but real life. Serial killers became a phenomenon in this country, and people in Houston became targets. The so-called Candyman killer sexually abused and murdered multiple young boys. The killing came to an end when a teenage boy, Elmer Wayne Henley Jr., turned the gun on the Candyman. As the story unfolded, investigators found out that Henley wasn't exactly a hero. For the first time in over 50 years, he's telling his side of the story. He was an apprentice for the Candyman, a.k.a. Dean Corll.
There was something Dean saw in Wayne. There's a vulnerability there that he can exploit.
While Henley is being charged with procuring young boys for him and committing some of the murders themselves.
Elmer Wayne Henley is the only accomplice to a serial killer who killed the killer to end it. I wanted to find out from Wayne what made him cross the line. And to my great surprise, he was willing to talk with me.
I'm not trying to absolve myself of guilt. I'm trying to make people see the truth.
The Serial Killer's Apprentice premieres this Sunday. You just saw renowned criminologist Dr. Katherine Ramsland interviewing Henley in that documentary, and she joins us this morning with a preview. Good morning.
Hello, Deborah.
This is so fascinating because you've dug a lot deeper, and we're going to get into that in a second. But let me pick up where the case was solved, at least initially. August 8th, 1973 in Pasadena, Henley shot and killed the Candyman. Take us from there.
Yeah, he was in a situation where he was afraid for his own life. He had two kids there with him at Dean Corll's house, and Corll had bound them and said he was going to kill them. But Wayne talked his way out of the bindings and said that he would participate with Corll. Once Corll laid down the gun in order to torture one of those kids, Wayne picked it up and said, "Stop, you have to stop doing this." And Corll rushed him, and Wayne started shooting. Corll had trained him to keep shooting till your target's down. So he kept shooting and killed Corll.
Wow. All right. During questioning by the police, he, initially had said that he did it in self-defense, which he probably could have gotten away with. Did he explain to you why he admitted to being an accomplice?
He could have gotten away with it. He would have been a hero. But right away, in the back of the police car, he said there were bodies, and he wanted the families to have their boys back, the way he put it. So in part, it was because he knew he had responsibility in this. He wanted to set some things straight if he could. And in his he made two statements, one that day and one the next day, where he admitted his part in all of it and then led the police to the bodies, which they would not have found on their own.
The question is oftentimes asked, is a serial killer born or made? Take us into the psyche of the Candyman killer, Dean Corll, like his background.
He's a tough one because there's so much secrecy surrounding him. He was, it's difficult to find actual facts. He had grown up in a home with a very narcissistic mother who had married 5 times, 2 of them to the same man twice. And she refused to see who he really was. She did not accept that he was gay, for example, and really just was a very needy type of person. And several of his father and his stepfathers had been abusive to him. So, he grew up kind of callous and keeping to himself. He served some time in the military, but we really don't know at what point, he had experiences with other men. We don't have any idea how he was feeling about that.
And that was a different time too. Say you were gay at that time was very different. And you talked. He made sexual advances to a young male worker at the candy store where he worked.
Yes.
And his mother, instead of sitting him down and saying, "Okay, tell me what's going on," she fired the young boy he made the sexual advance to. And so they had said that very narcissistic, but also very coddling. Now with Elmer Wayne Henley, somewhat compromised in his growing up.
Yeah, and he had an abusive alcoholic father who beat up his mother and grandmother in front of him and shot at him twice to kill him. So he had his own issues with father figures. Then he was raised by his mother and grandmother, and he was the oldest of 4 boys in the family. They were pretty much destitute when the father abandoned them. So he started working in a gas station part-time for peanuts, just to help bring in some money. He wanted to be a minister. That's what he hoped he'd be, and or a state trooper. He wanted to be a protector.
Yeah, and so I mentioned that somewhat compromised. It made it easy for Dean Corll to kind of manipulate and groom him, if you will. But when you sat down with him, you mentioned this thing about, you really believe that this was not somebody who would have done this on his own, if not for the set of circumstances. And you talk about a temporary psychopath.
Yeah, it's a concept that I've kind of gotten out of studying a lot of the team killers, the compliant accomplice, the accomplice who really didn't want to do this stuff, but did it in a compliant way. You know, once they're free of the influence of the predator, they wonder, how did they ever do those things? The cruel and callousness that they had, it wasn't them. And they couldn't imagine how they had fallen under the spell of this other person and committed things that were just not who they were. And so that's why I came up with the temporary psychopath. They're acting in a psychopathic way under the influence of a predator, but they're not themselves psychopathic.
Yeah. It's so interesting, that theory, because a lot of people will say, I would never. You don't ever know what you would never do necessarily. In your studies, you found that as well.
I absolutely agree. If you get the right circumstances coming together, you might be vulnerable to this.
All right. Last question. Serial killer, born or made?
Too complex to answer. Born and made.
Okay, both of them. All right. Thank you so much for sharing some insight with us this morning. We look forward to seeing this premiere.
Thank you.
All right, The Serial Killer's Apprentice premieres on Sunday, August 17th at 8 p.m. on Investigation Discovery and will be available to stream on HBO Max.